Well, let's quickly move to animal mutilations. I mean, I've followed Linda Moulton Howe's work for a long time, and on animal mutilations, and just love her investigation. So it's something you've also taken on, and it's probably a topic that probably turns off a lot of people that have got a love for UFOs. It's not something a lot of people actually want anything to do with. Why is that?
Well, not only that, but there's not a lot of people that actually want to do it. Do
It's
the
not sexy
investigation.
enough, I guess.
Well, it's not sexy enough, but it's really intriguing. It's out of all my investigations. Okay, well, out of all my investigations, ghosts are the ones that scare me the most. I just did a ghost investigation the weekend before Halloween with my daughter in a cemetery, and we picked up some EVPs, and I picked up off in a distance like a scream, like somebody was screaming.
Wow.
Really cool stuff. Um, and it scares me, but I have no problem tracking Bigfoot and looking for aliens, but ghosts,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
whatever reason. Now, the cattle mutilations, when you do a cattle mutilation investigation, the first thing you have to remember at all times is we really don't know how this animal was killed. And until we know that it falls, and I've done enough of these now that I know that if it falls within the cattle mutilation phenomenon, that there's really not a lot of danger to you or to your team when investigating cattle mutilations. But when you're coming up on an animal death, you really don't know how it died. Anthrax, or hit by a train, right? Amtrak, anthrax, or some type of viral, something that you can actually contract yourself and take it back home to your family. So I do things differently than other investigators. There was one cattle mutilation investigator that was taking his dog, and he said, well, my dog was helping me find evidence. Well, but if your dog gets in and gets into the animal and contracts whatever killed that animal, or catches whatever, then you take that dog home, and
Hmm.
not only put the dog's life at risk, you put everybody's life at risk at home. So um, it's really hard to control an animal, unlike a human, where I can tell the people with me on my team, stay so many feet away from that. Make sure you wear rubber gloves. Make sure you wear some, whatever. Don't be touching that. And the reason is because there's been some cases where the ranchers themselves had touched the animal, and they would lose the feeling in their hand, and it'd be real tingly. So I know that there's something on those animals. Now that's the paranormal side. Now, if it was non-paranormal and it died of viral infections, and they touched it, then they contracted, or they could have. Now, I did an investigation last year where there was a horse that wasn't mutilated, but it was found dead, and the rancher swears that the horse was pregnant. But when there was a necropsy done on the horse, the veterinarian didn't find a fetus, or didn't find it, uh, an
Yeah.
infant, or whatever they call them. So so there's a question there is, did he think that the horse, was pregnant, because the vet says that they showed no signs of being pregnant. But then I go back to my abduction cases, and I've worked some abduction cases where women were pregnant, and they were known to be pregnant from the doctor, and then they didn't
Okay.
have abortion, but they lost, they lost the baby, and it would just wake up one morning and it's gone. And I had a couple of cases out here in Colorado, really, really hard to do abduction cases and stuff like that, because you're dealing with humans and human
Yep.
emotions. Um, so you use your experience and like, okay, well, this guy's been around animals, so I'm just going to I'm going to trust his judgment that the animal was, and pregnant. I'm going to base that on all my other investigations where vets have been wrong before because of the UFO phenomenon. And the more I pursued that, he lost a couple more animals under unusual circumstances. There was a case earlier last year where, no, actually, earlier last year, where it was a bona fide animal mutilation with the strange cuts in the area. And then animals were dying, other species were dying too. Um, Horses and goats and
Hmm.
pigs and cows, and so it was all happening at once. And now I'm thinking, oh my God, did I jump into something that could be viral, that's jumping species? And that was an episode also on Alien Highway. in which one of the witnesses actually witnessed a helicopter airlifting a dead elk out. Now,
Right.
not during hunting season, but even during hunting season, unless you're like, you know, really wealthy, that you airlift, your kills out
Yep.
with a
Be
helicopter. It
nice.
was in the area where animals were found dead.
The one thing I've always wondered about animal mutilations, do people see UFO activity before and after the mutilations?
Yeah, they actually do. Um, a lot of times, and it's really funny too when I talk to people that had cases of strange animal deaths or mutilations. I always say, well, I hate to ask you this question, but I have to ask you: have you seen any strange lights in the area before or anything afterwards? Generally, it's always before because I'm talking to them within a couple of days of the mutilation. And I'll tell you about 3/4 of the time they've seen, strange lights, balls of light, either in the pasture or, in the sky or something. Now, the one thing that I love, I know that your viewers out there going, well, that could be this or that could be that, but and that's true. But when you're talking to ranchers that live in very rural areas, they know the area. They're used to looking at the stars. They're used to looking at the environment. So anything that looks out of place, they really notice pretty quickly
Hmm.
because they're out there way early in the morning before the sun rises. And a lot of times they're out there at night too, working outside. So they're very, very in tune to their environment. So it's really, really like a law enforcement, you know,
Yep.
cops are usually, they know their district and then they switch from districts to districts, but they really know their areas and they really know the type of people and who they have to deal with from time to time. Same thing with ranchers. So they see balls of light. Now I've had a couple of ranchers that actually saw a solid craft looking type UFO. Most of the time, the balls of light is what they see. And what's interesting about the balls of light, and I've been investigating that for a few years now, and they go way, way back to, well, you can go way back to the, World War II, where they were called the Foo Fighters.
Yep.
I'm not saying that's where the band got the name from. They say they just made up the name, but how can you make up something that was talked
Yeah.
heavily about during the 40s? And the Foo Fighters were basically, I think the name came from a comic book. If you're a foo, you're a fighter or something. But uh, these balls of light were following our fighters and following our bombers, and they were also following the Japanese fighters and bombers. We thought it was Japanese technology. Japanese thought it was our technology. As it turns out, it's somebody else's technology.
Hmm.
And there's even works of art. If you go way, way back, it shows balls, these like balls of light in the paintings and interesting stuff. Now, whether or not the artist was depicting of what people said they saw, it depends on what program you watch on TV saying yes they did, no they didn't. But it's just kind of interesting that the artist would draw these balls of light in the sky and on his painting. So we don't know how far back they go. Now, when you talk to Native Americans, and I've been really lucky living in the Four Corners region to be able to do that, um, it's no big deal to them. It's something that generations within their tribes have seen, and that's the Utes and that's
Yeah.
the Navajo and the
That
Apaches that we've talked
would,
to.
that would just about be the hottest of the hot spots in the country, wouldn't it? The Four Corners.
But yeah, but really, it's hot everywhere. It really is. The thing with the 37th parallel, my theory based on the 37th-degree latitude theory was, we have multiple highways across the United States that we travel, like I-70 and there's, I-40, and then even, Highway 66 or whatever. But UFOs have a tendency of traveling. From what I've seen, majority of them have a tendency of traveling east to west. If they're going north to south, but when they bug out for whatever reason, it seems like they dart off either towards the east or to the west. And so I started looking at that theory back then and noticed that my animals, every one of the cattle mutilations that I've investigated, the animal carcass was facing east and west. And
Hmm.
then even when you have multiple animal deaths at one time, they're all facing the same direction and they're all laying on the same side, if it be their left side or the right side. Very, very interesting stuff. Once you start doing more and more of these, you start seeing a pattern.
Yeah.
And some of them are actually laying in a 16 to 22 foot I don't want to say crop circle, we'll just say ground depression. And the ground depression, when I had the soil analyzed inside the ground depression compared to outside the ground depression, the nutrients in the inside the ground depression have been changed, and the soil is less soluble. So some type of energy source physically changed the nutrients or changed the soil, and that's been true with every case that I ran soil analysis out here in Colorado, and it actually compared with soil analysis out of Kansas City, Missouri, and then out of Georgia also. Even though we have 3 different states, 3 different soil types, but yet we ended up with the same type of analysis. But the majority of the time, people see these balls of light beforehand. It could be, a couple months, could be a month before, could be a week before. And then sometimes afterwards, I get reports that they see unmarked helicopters flying over the areas where the animals were mutilated. Now, I've heard all kinds of rumors in the past. Well, it's the military's doing it, the government's doing it. I even had someone tell me, oh, it's special forces doing it. It's when they can successfully mutilate a cow, then they can graduate from the special forces. I just felt like taking that guy and just popping him one in the face for hopefully I would knock some sense into him, because obviously he had no sense at all. Because animal mutilations has been going on since 1967 with the first case of Snippy the horse, which was really, her name was Lady. We've had over 10,000 cases in the United States alone. And out of the 10,000 cases that were investigated by law enforcement, they never found a culprit. They never could pin anything to a predator or to humans, so it's been an open case. So theoretically, this is probably the largest, if not the largest, animal cruelty case, if not in the world, at least in the United States. Now, you can go back further and find some information of animal mutilations back in the late 1800s out of Missouri. I actually found an article in one of the older magazines that talked about a mutilation case, and where the ranchers actually, they saw this UFO craft hovering over the ranch, and they ran in the house and they thought, that's it, we're all going to die, and they hid in there. And then the next day, the father comes out, with a shotgun, and he finds, I think, 3 of his cows dead, and void of blood. So it's not anything new. Now, if you talk to the Native Americans, they've talked about animal mutilations that they've seen in the past. They don't like talking about them because depending on the tribe, that could relate to, a shapeshifter or skinwalker or something like that. So it's really hard to get information out of them, but they will tell you. I mean, I got a really great opportunity during the skinwalker episode to talk to a Ute elder. And unfortunately, his interview didn't make the show. But what I did learn from the Ute tribe, and I learned off camera, and he wouldn't verify it on camera. The Ute tribe has got, of course, we all know they have a name for Bigfoot. Sasquatch is not their name; they have a separate name for it. But Sasquatch is an Indian name for it. They also have a name for UFOs, and a lot of tribes do, and they call them, their name for storm travelers or sky people or something. That's our, our definition of their name. But the Ute tribe actually has a name for gray aliens.
Oh.
And when I got him talking about that, and then when he realized he was talking about it, he stopped. He says, I can't say that on camera. I can't say that. So I can't say that. I said, well, okay, but I understand he can't put himself out there. So there's certain things that they don't like to talk about, but my gosh, they have a name for a gray alien, and that's in their culture. It's not anything new. It's not, and they've been around way before, the Europeans migrated to North America. So, so much for our military and our government doing it, unless George Washington was crossing the Delaware with a mutilated animal in his boat, yeah, you never know.
No, you don't.